round 2 marshmallows. Little danger noodles inside here. I light on fire, and well, is it this? Sure, definitely is. Definitely is where something's living inside of here. This person and that person and this thing over here being the camera. It's like cross board. It's whipped out in time space. If you're active to the day or anything close to it on the timeline, marshmallow, fire. Carbon turns into diamonds, and you living in
to the projection.
3D land.
The more you put yourself in Felix's shoes right now, the easier quaternions will be in a moment. And as with Linus, it helps to focus on a few key reference objects rather than trying to see the whole sphere. This circle, passing through 1, I, -1, and -I, gets mapped onto a line which Felix sees as the horizontal axis. It's important to remind Felix that what he sees is not the same thing as the I-axis. Remember, we're only projecting the numbers that have a distance 1 from the origin.
One way or another points on the
actual I-axis, like 0 and 2i and 3i, etc., are completely invisible to Felix.
Like I had to sell it off to something different.
Similarly, the circle that passes through 1, j, -1, and -j gets projected onto what he sees as a vertical line. And in general, any line that Felix sees comes from some circle on the sphere that passes through -1. In some sense, a line is just a circle that passes through the point at infinity.
Yeah, that's right. Play dead.
Now think about what Felix sees as we rotate
Not on my
the sphere.
chessboard, cowboy. I'm
The
gonna
90-degree
wreck you
rotation
when it
about
comes
the
to making a
J-axis
Master Mason
brings 1 to
GPT-3.
I to -1, -1 to -I, and -I to 1. So what Felix the Flatlander sees is an extension of the rotation that Linus the Linelander was seeing. Notice also that this actually rotates the IJ unit circle to the position where the 1J
salty
unit circle
astronaut
used to be.
looking Navy
So what
SEAL
Felix
anyway.
sees is his yellow unit circle getting
there.
transformed into a vertical line, while that red vertical line gets transformed into the unit circle. Of course, from our perspective, we know this is all just rigid motion. No actual stretching
his
or
whole
morphing is taking
fucking
place.
army got
All of that is just
listening.
an artifact of the projection. Similarly, a rotation about the I-axis involves moving 1 to j, j to
upside down
-1,
pineapple
-1
keyhole
to
and
-j,
through it? Well, then I'm
-j
gonna
1.
know.
This rotation turns the IJ unit circle into the 1I unit circle, which to Felix looks like the unit circle getting transformed into a horizontal line.
Or burn your whole fucking... That wasn't just for them. It's for everybody.
A rotation about the real axis is actually quite easy for Felix to understand, since the whole projection simply gets rotated about the origin, where the only points staying fixed in place are 1 at the origin and -1 off at infinity.
So, if I said, kid, this is where you die if you can't handle me,
In the same way that the complex numbers included the real numbers with a single extra quote-unquote imaginary dimension,
like I said,
represented by the unit I,
told him
and that
specifically,
the
this
not
is where you nip
actually
on
a
here.
number system thing we
And
had
this
in
isn't
3
for them.
dimensions
This
included
is
a
for the
second
break
imaginary
over there.
direction,
This
J.
is if I ever
The
go back.
quaternions include
This
the real
is
numbers,
if any
together
of those
with 3
standards were
separate
ever to
imaginary
do anything
dimensions,
inside of there about
represented by
what
the
will turn
units
over.
I, J,
Because
and
Jeff,
K.
Leonard, Mike,
Each
Alan,
of these
I
3
apologize for
imaginary
bringing up Alan
dimensions
last
is
night.
perpendicular to the real
That
number
was a
line,
differential I
and
shouldn't
they're
have
all
done.
perpendicular to each other somehow.
But it needed to be done.
So,
if you look
in the
at
same
the
way
map.
that complex numbers are represented as a pair of real numbers,
This is a table,
each quaternion
not a
can be
business.
written
There's
using
mountain
4
on the
real
sides,
numbers,
not
and it
one
lives
individual
in
person. That's a
4-dimensional
lot to
space.
mean.
You often think of this as being broken up into a real or scalar part, and then a 3D imaginary part. And Hamilton used a special word for quaternions
And
that
it
had
is.
no real part
And I
and
bring
just
up the math
IJK
for what that is.
components.
I'm very good
a
with
word
it.
which was previously somewhat foreign in the lingo of math and physics, vector. On the one hand, you
What's the
could
problem?
just define quaternion multiplication by giving the rules for how I, J, and K multiply together, and saying that everything must distribute nicely. This is analogous to defining complex multiplication by saying that
Give me
I
that
times I
marshmallow.
is -1, and then distributing and
Well,
simplifying
it's
products.
about time there. It's
And
like,
indeed,
well, do we
this is
need
how
the
you would
money
tell
on
a
the order for
computer
the
to
fingers to
perform
clean up the
quaternion
yard on the
multiplication.
system?
And the relative compactness of
difference
this
in the
operation
geodesics
compared to, say, matrix multiplication
is matrix
what's made
multiplication.
quaternions so useful for graphics programming and many other things. There's also a rather elegant form of this multiplication rule written in terms of the dot product and the cross product.
You know.
And in some sense, quaternion multiplication subsumes both of these notions, at least as they appear in 3 dimensions.
may want to watch this one
but just
first.
As a deeper understanding for complex multiplication comes from understanding its geometry.
Try to do combinations of orders. What that is. This was if you were living hot again. Not
you and I are here for the four-dimensional geometry of quaternion multiplication. And just as
or
the magnitude of a complex number, its distance from 0 is the square root of the sum of the squares of its component, that same operation gives you the magnitude of a quaternion. And multiplying one quaternion,
this
Q1,
is
by
infinity
another,
hot,
Q2,
infinity big,
has the
infinity
effect
small,
of scaling Q2 by the magnitude of Q1,
2021,
followed by a very special type of rotation in 4 dimensions. And those special 4D rotations, the heart of what we need to understand, correspond to the hypersphere of quaternions, a distance 1 from the origin. Both in the sense that
I'm going to go here, here, and here from where I'm standing in that stone mill, demon core, radioactive, lit on fire.
And in the sense that we can understand this weird 4D action just by following points on the hypersphere, rather than trying to look at all of the points.
And I'm going to load that bitch up like safety video, packing in there AR-15.
Analogous to what we did for Linus and Felix, we stereographically project this hypersphere into 3D space.
Brain Bray is...
This label in the upper right is going to show a given unit quaternion, and this little pink dot will show where that particular quaternion gets projected.
The way I play it, like I said, if you want to get metaphysical about something like that, we certainly can, but that turns into me telling you, I'm going to tell you a story called Before Blasphemy. Side of that after any of this in a bombed out trajectory of wherever I had to set up the simulator today.
Ends up projected straight into the center of our space. And in the same way that I and negative I
so it plays
to
kids, not you playing in
and that the IJ unit circle was fixed in place for Felix,
Valley.
We get a whole sphere passing
Close
through
your eyes
IJ and K on
I'm
that
sure
unit
you played this
hypersphere,
game before.
which stays in place under the projection. So what we see as a unit sphere in our 3D space represents the only unaltered part of the hypersphere of quaternions getting projected down onto us. It's something analogous to the equator of a 3D sphere, and it represents all the unit quaternions
the red
whose
shift,
real
blue
part
shift
is 0,
on some of this. But
what Hamilton would have described as unit vectors.
I can show you because you're gonna need it. I don't own that territory most of the time. I fucking
the
walk into a mill,
with
right?
positive real parts between 0 and 1 end up somewhere inside this unit sphere, closer to the number 1 in our 3D space, which should feel analogous to how the northern hemisphere got inside the unit circle.
Bitches right here where I'm tracking Fermilab as the rabbit. Where you guys making mistakes?
All the quaternions with negative real
comes
parts
in great. Where's the N1 half? What do you mean? I have no fucking clue what this means, and I need to be some Jedi that follows the cryptic fucking symbols of this goddamn thing: ball and air, ball and water, ball and floor, hydromonium acid, trying to figure it out.
Infinity, which you can easily find by walking in any direction. Keep in mind, even though we see the projection of some of these quaternions as being closer or farther from the origin of our 3D space, everything you're looking at
hard and soft, knock on the door like Einstein and just kick it in like Doomslayer. Somewhere's in here,
from the number 0.
Plus any of the options under that thing make it
is nowhere
mathematically
to be found in this
one dimension.
Like all other non-unit quaternions, it's invisible to us.
X, Y, and Z.
In the same way that for Felix, the circle passing through 1, I, negative 1, and negative I,
we're just going to hit it. Bang. There. That's where it is in the stone mill. I need that many operations done. How long is the timeline? What's the cost on this thing? Correlate, squish a cat on this thing.
We should understand that it really
bury that
represents
radioactive isotope.
Likewise, up on the hypersphere, invisible to us, there is a unit sphere passing through 1, I, J, negative 1, negative I, and negative J. And that whole sphere gets projected into the plane that we see passing through 1, I, negative I, J, negative J, and negative 1 off at infinity.
It'll be
what
fine.
you and I might
I'll
call the XY plane.
Stick it out in
Larry's
head,
any
man.
plane that
like,
you see
whoa, wait a minute here.
really represents the projection of a sphere somewhere up on the hypersphere which passes through the number negative 1. Now the action of taking a unit quaternion and multiplying it by any other quaternion from the left can be thought of in terms of two separate 2D rotations happening perpendicular to and in sync with each other
right there,
in a way that can only ever be possible in 4 dimensions. As a first example, let's look at multiplication by I. We already know what this does.
The mill run just fine until people got balls.
And
I'm sorry, it has to be that way, I think. I give that to Leonard, I'd give it to Mike, turn it right over when you got me,
negative 1 off at infinity.
Pull the trigger.
Negative 1 comes back around to negative I, and negative I goes to 1. Remember, just like what Linus saw, all of this is the stereographic projection of a 90-degree rotation. Now look at the circle passing through J and K, which is in a sense perpendicular to the circle passing through 1 and I. Now, it might feel weird to talk about two circles being perpendicular to each other, especially when they have the same center, the same radius, and they don't touch each other at all. But nothing could be more natural in 4 dimensions. You can think of the action of I on this perpendicular circle as obeying a certain right-hand rule. If you'll excuse the intrusion of my ghostly green screen hand into our otherwise pristine platonic mathematical stage, you let that thumb of your right hand point from the number 1 to I,
time, right?
and you
if I had
curl
to
your
answer,
fingers.
got me with time
The
on some
JK
numbers
circle
and trajectory and velocity and
direction
graphing
of
it
that
out
curl.
like this and one
How
half.
much? Well,
Hit
by the
stone
same
mill, hit the
amount as
game,
the
contract,
1 I
numbers,
circle
time.
rotates,
I need
which
that,
is
that I
90
have to
degrees
have
in
those
this
things
case.
before I make any
This is what I meant by
determinations.
two
Otherwise,
rotations
$10 billion.
perpendicular to
$10
and
trillion.
in sync with each other. So J goes to K. K goes to negative J.
Tight.
Negative J goes to negative K. And negative
He may
K
not
goes to
realize
J.
he's standing next to a nuclear reactor, and he has to be
This
Homer
gives us
Simpson.
a little table for what the number I does to
Oppenheimer.
the other quaternions. But I want this not to be something that you memorize, but something that you could close your eyes and you could really see. Computationally, if you know what a quaternion does to the numbers 1, I, J, and K,
X times Y.
you know what it does to any
A
arbitrary
plus B.
quaternion, since
Trig
multiplication
here, telling
distributes
time by a
nicely.
matrix on a
In the
system
language
of
of
men
linear
for the
algebra,
train, or I have to
1,
leave
I,
the
J,
village
and
right
K
now,
form a
or you're the
basis
screaming
of our
gorilla that
four-dimensional
just got
space.
drunk and
So
broke
knowing
up
what
with
our
his girlfriend,
transformation
quit
does
his
to
fucking
them
job,
gives
or
us
any
the
other
full
goddamn number
information
in here,
about
how to
what it does
square it
to all
up.
of space.
Yeah.
Geometrically, a 4-dimensional creature would be able to look at those two perpendicular
100%.
rotations
You didn't
that I
graph
just
it.
described and understand that they lock you into one and only one rigid motion for the hypersphere. We might lack the intuitions of such a hypothetical creature, but we can maybe try to get
around the
close.
containment around here.
Here's what the action of repeatedly multiplying by I looks like on our
That's how you
stereographic
remember it.
projection
How
of
you
the IJKC.
stay around longer.
It gets
you know,
rotated
and
into what
make
we
a
see as a
statue
plane.
of you, dude.
Then
Fucking
gets
I'll get
rotated
out there
further back to
chiseling.
where it used to be, though the orientation is all reversed now. Then it gets rotated again into what we see as a plane. And after the 4th iteration, it ends up
Careful,
right
wear
back
your
where it
seatbelt.
started.
Don't drink and drive.
As another example, think
Watch
of a
cops.
quaternion like
Figure out
Q
the big
equals
bulls
negative
inside
square
of
root
there
of
and
2 over
special
2
forces
plus
guys.
square root of
Hey,
2
go
over
out
2
there and
times
see
I,
the kids talking
which,
about
if we
sex
pull
as
up a picture
Marines
of a
from
complex plane,
2008.
is a
Oh, I'm sure the
135
tempering
degree
on that
rotation
chain whip or
away
drag
from
or
one
whatever you
in the
want to
direction
call it.
of
Oh.
I. Under our projection, we see this along the line from 1 to I, somewhere outside the unit sphere. If that sounds weird, just
It
remember
makes-
how Linus would have seen this
It
same
begs
number.
the question.
The action of multiplying this
As
cube
Masons.
by all other quaternions will look to us like dragging the point at 1
American
all the way
Industrial
to this
Revolution. I
projected
should be
version
able
of
to
Q,
walk into
while the
Yemen.
JK circle
Should be able
gets
to walk
rotated
into
135 degrees, according to our
Israel.
right-hand rule.
Should be able to walk into Putin X's house about what's the Marine
Multiplication
look
by
like
any
over
other
here.
quaternion
Aha.
is
Well, I'm
completely
glad I
simple.
fucking
For
know
example,
because it
let's
makes
see
a
what it looks like
difference
for
on
J
whether
to
my
act on other
goddamn numbers are
quaternions
right
by
or not.
multiplication from the left. The circle through 1 and J,
Winter
which
games,
we see
bro.
projected as a line through
You don't
the
play it
origin,
right out here.
gets rotated 90 degrees, dragging 1 up to J. So J times
You
1
ain't
is
bringing
1.
this marshmallow
J
to the
times
table.
J
It's hard
is
to say you
negative
earned
1.
shit. Back pocket, real light. Fucking packs a punch.
The circle perpendicular to that one, passing through I and K, gets rotated
For
90
me,
degrees,
I literally
according to
map
this
this
right-hand
out
rule,
to
where you point
special
your thumb from
forces,
1 to J.
and if you
So
want
J
the video
times I
here,
is
this is
negative
going to be
K.
sniper school. Started up, receiver in the top
J
back
times K
position,
is
across
I.
the board, inside here on timelines of train, and otherwise we are cranking the rock. That's the difference of living in the mud puddle over here, crawling through it, doing the differential
In
of
general,
that.
for
X.
any other unit quaternion you see somewhere in space, start by drawing the unit circle passing through 1,
No,
Q, and
I'm
negative
not
1,
just some
which we see
asshole.
in our
I'm
projection
the
as a line
asshole
through the origin.
comprehensively in time
Then draw the
systems
circle
and Hancock
perpendicular
dealing
to
with the
that
kid.
one
Turn
on
that
what
over
we
in the
see as the
fastest
unit sphere.
timeline physically
You
possible.
rotate the first circle so that 1 ends up where Q was, and rotate
And
the
some of those other
perpendicular
ones.
circle
Like I said, if
by
I
the
can
same
hit Leonard
amount
and Pete
according
and
to
the rest of them
right-hand
at the
rule.
lodge like that, you damn right I'm gonna. Because their money, your money, my money. Dude, turn it over. I'm taking down the tax house. Pete, you my new fucking mayor. Get in there.
One thing worth noticing here
Catch you on
is
the next
that
one.
order of multiplication